Hi, I'm Swapnil Srivastava and I head the analytics practice for Evalueserve globally. Leveraging data and analytics to generate insights, improve decision making, and gain a sustainable competitive advantage is very commonplace and almost a trend nowadays. In large organizations, problem statements or analytic use cases can run into hundreds or even thousands. So it's very important for these organizations to have a scientific yet pragmatic approach to prioritize these use cases and have an approach to convert them into a logical roadmap. What I have seen and observed is that majority of organizations follow the consultant's favorite, a two by two matrix approach. In this approach, they will use metrics like cost or feasibility or impact and categorize them as low, medium, or high on an XY plane. And where these use cases land on that XY plane dictates their priority. Now, in my opinion and in my experience, this approach is incomplete and also has some major flaws. Let me explain to you those flaws using two real life examples. A Fortune 500 manufacturing firm used cost and impact to prioritize their pilot use cases. And the successful ones were taken to the governance council for funding requests for moving them to production. And to their shock, none of them cut it. The reason was that the impact metrics for all of these use cases was revenue, while the priority metric for the senior leadership was operating margins, right? So the lesson here is that while you're prioritizing your use cases, you should always look into strategic alignment. Now the second example is about a Fortune 500 technology firm, which used effort and impact to prioritize some of their digital marketing analytics use cases, right? A few weeks into the first use case, they realized that their web analytics platform needed upgrade, and also the data management system didn't have the capability to deal with unstructured data or streaming data, which was very, very important for this project, right? So they had to put the project on hold, and a lot of effort and a lot of money went into waste. The lesson here is that every time you start a use case, you should make sure that you have the right data, the right technological infrastructure, and the right platform in place, right? So we just learned that the two by two matrices do not cover all the dimensions required to prioritize analytics use cases, right? And so we came up with our own approach, a framework called the CRUISE framework, right? And let me explain what that means. First, CRUISE stands for complexity, potential ROI, universality, integrity of data, strategic alignment, and ease of implementation, right? So let's dive into each one of those parameters. So complexity could arise from the number of stakeholders involved, the number of geographies or time zones involved, the number of or type of algorithms, or the type of technologies, right? And higher the complexity, usually higher is the duration of the project, right? Complexity could also mean the maturity of the problem statement, right? So it could be descriptive in nature, or it could be predictive or prescriptive in nature, right? And typically, higher the complexity from this perspective, higher is the ROI, right? So depending on how you define complexity or what is your focus parameter, higher complexity could mean a higher or a lower score for that use case, right? Now coming to the second parameter, which is potential ROI, right? This is very, very important. I mean, usually, clients give it, a lot of weightage, right? So there are different types of ROI, which are considered. Typically, it is either revenue impact or cost or expense impact, profitability or automation-led productivity gains, or employee engagement or customer satisfaction, and so on, right? So higher the ROI, higher is the score for that particular use case, right? Now the third parameter is universality, which typically means how reusable a particular use case is, right? For example, if you've developed a forecasting algorithm for your marketing function, could you reuse that algorithm or parts of it to other parts of the business, right? Could you use it in supply chain or pricing or finance, right? So higher the reusability component of a particular use case, higher is the score for that use case from a priority standpoint. So the next parameter is integrity of data, right? And that speaks to availability and quality of data. So when you're starting an analytics project and you see that you have all the right data sets available and in high quality, that is when you get a high score, right? So that's an easy one. Then coming to the next one, is strategic alignment. Now, any use case which is not aligned to your enterprise priorities will find it very hard to get funding, right? So one has to make sure that when they are, kick-starting, analytics initiative, then the use cases, are directly or indirectly aligned to the overall priorities, right? And let me give you an example. So let's say your organization leaders have chosen gain in market share as the North Star KPI, right? So any use case which impacts revenue, which impacts customer acquisition or retention, which impacts pricing, are directly impacting market share, and hence they will get a higher score, right? But you have to also keep in mind that there might be use cases which impact something like employee engagement, right? And they should also get a moderately high score because not directly but indirectly they do impact revenue and hence market share. Because we can make a safe assumption that higher employee engagement would mean higher employee satisfaction, which would mean better customer servicing, which would mean higher customer lifetime value and hence higher revenue or gain in market share, right? Then the last parameter is ease of implementation. And based on experience, I'm sure everybody would agree that the two biggest challenges in the last leg or the last mile of analytics when we are trying to productionize or implement is change management and lack of proper tool or technological infrastructure, right? So if you're going to receive low objection from the end users, from an adoption perspective, and if you have all the right tools and technological infrastructure in place for that use case, then you get a higher score, right? So now that you understand all of these 6 parameters, right, the next step is to basically arrive at an overall attractiveness score for each use case, right? And there are multiple ways to do it. The one easy way to do is to get a weighted average, score of all the parameters. But then you can also use some more complex algorithms like analytical hierarchical process to again arrive at an overall score, right? There are some other things which are important and you should keep in mind. One is dependencies, right? So there are always certain activities or projects which are a prerequisite for some other projects. So you should always keep them in mind as you are sequencing them. The second one is I would always advise my clients to periodically refresh their analytical roadmaps because there are certain businesses which operate in a very dynamic environment, right? So that's it, and best of luck.